Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive. It's all about Bitcoin in 2025. For anyone out there thinking about maybe, dipping their toes into the Bitcoin world,
Absolutely.
you're in the right place because today we're going to break down what's happening with Bitcoin right now, some of the big things that are affecting its price, and try to figure out if it's still a good investment in 2025. And we've got some pretty surprising stuff to unpack today,
Yeah, it's a crazy world out there.
especially like what's going on in El Salvador.
Mm.
What's happening with these new accounting rules that are like affecting companies like Tesla.
Yeah, the Bitcoin world is constantly changing. Even in the last few months, things have really shifted, so it's good to keep up to date.
Definitely. Okay, so let's unpack this. So right now, Bitcoin is sitting at $99,151.
Which sounds impressive.
Yeah, it does sound impressive, but it's down about 3% from yesterday,
It is.
which seems like a pretty big swing for one day, right?
That's the thing about Bitcoin. It's volatile. So we saw it bounce between $102,276 and $98,188 just today. So you can see these big swings just in one day, which tells us there's a lot happening behind the scenes.
Yeah, for sure. So for someone like me who's trying to understand Bitcoin,
Mhm.
what are the big things driving these price swings? What should I be paying attention to?
Well, there are three key factors, I would say, that are really driving this volatility right now. The first is institutional investors. We're seeing more and more big players like hedge funds and pension funds getting into Bitcoin,
Okay.
and when they make moves, it has a big impact on the market. The second factor is the U.S. tariffs.
Right.
Those new tariffs are creating uncertainty in the market, and some investors are getting nervous, which can lead to sell-offs. And the third factor is the whales.
Whales. Wait, are we talking about like actual whales buying Bitcoin?
No, not actual whales, not yet at least. In the Bitcoin world, whales are individuals or groups that hold massive amounts of Bitcoin. And when they buy or sell, it can cause these huge waves in the market. So you've got these three forces, institutional investors, the tariffs, and the whales all pushing and pulling on Bitcoin's price. And that's what's creating this volatility we're seeing.
So is Bitcoin going to rebound, or is this a sign of a bigger correction? What are you thinking?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's tough to say for sure, but I think understanding these drivers can help you make sense of why the price is moving the way it is, which is at least a good starting point for any potential investor.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about some of the major developments that have been happening in the Bitcoin world this year. 2025 has been pretty eventful so far, right?
Absolutely. One of the biggest developments has been the approval of several Bitcoin ETFs,
ETFs.
which stands for Exchange Traded Fund. An ETF is basically like a basket of assets.
Got it.
And in this case, it's a basket of Bitcoin, and it allows investors to buy and sell Bitcoin on traditional stock exchanges. This has been a game changer because it's opened up Bitcoin to a whole new group of investors, people who might not have been comfortable buying Bitcoin directly, but are happy to invest in an ETF through their broker.
So it's kind of like making Bitcoin more mainstream, more accessible.
Exactly. And we've seen a huge surge in interest in Bitcoin ETFs, especially from traditional investors. For example, BlackRock and Fidelity both launched Bitcoin ETFs in January, and they saw record inflows, meaning tons of people were pouring money into them.
Wow. So that shows you how much demand there is for this kind of product.
Absolutely.
That's pretty amazing. But then there's El Salvador,
Right.
which was like one of the first countries to adopt Bitcoin as legal tender, and now they're dropping it,
Yeah.
which seems like a pretty big deal, right? What happened there?
Yeah, El Salvador's experiment with Bitcoin was certainly a bold move, but it ultimately didn't work out as they had hoped. They faced a lot of challenges, including low adoption rates, technical difficulties, and a lot of pressure from the International Monetary Fund, which wasn't too happy about the move. So in the end, they decided to reverse course and drop Bitcoin as legal tender.
So does this mean Bitcoin's dream of becoming like a global currency is over?
It's certainly a setback, but it's important to remember that El Salvador is just one country, and there are many other countries that are still exploring the potential of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, so it's too early to say what the long-term impact of El Salvador's decision will be.
Okay, that's a really good point. Speaking of interesting developments, have you seen what's been happening with these new accounting rules for companies that hold Bitcoin?
Oh, yeah.
Tesla is reporting a $600 million profit just from its Bitcoin holdings.
It's pretty fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
These new rules require companies to be more transparent about their crypto holdings, and it's having a big impact, both good and bad. For example, Tesla's big profit from its Bitcoin investment is great news for the company. But it also raises questions about potential tax liabilities down the road. On the other hand, you've got companies like MicroStrategy, which has invested really heavily in Bitcoin,
Okay.
and they're potentially facing a massive tax bill because of these unrealized gains.
Wait, unrealized gains, what does that mean?
Sure, an unrealized gain is basically a profit that you haven't cashed in yet.
Okay.
So if you buy Bitcoin at $50,000 and it goes up to $100,000, you have an unrealized gain of
I
$50,000.
see.
But you haven't actually made any money until you sell your Bitcoin, at which point it becomes a realized gain.
Got it.
These new accounting rules are forcing companies to report these unrealized gains, which can have a big impact on their financial statements and could potentially lead to some pretty hefty tax
It's
bills.
like they're being taxed on money they haven't even made yet.
Exactly, which is why some companies are pushing back against these new rules.
Yeah.
But it's also creating more transparency, which is generally a good thing for investors,
Right.
especially if you're trying to understand how these companies are being affected by their Bitcoin holdings.
Okay, so we've got a lot of moving parts here, from institutional investors and whales to new ETFs and accounting rules. It's all having an impact on Bitcoin's price, which brings us to the big question: is Bitcoin going to hit that magical $200,000 mark that everyone's talking about?
Well, there are definitely some people who believe it's only a matter of time.
Yeah, like 10x Research, they're predicting $200,000 by the end of the year, right? What are they basing that on?
10x Research is a pretty well-respected research firm, and their prediction is based on a few key factors, including the growing adoption of Bitcoin, the increasing scarcity of Bitcoin as more and more coins are mined, and the potential for Bitcoin to become a more mainstream asset. So they're looking at the big picture and seeing a lot of potential for growth, which is leading them to make these kinds of predictions.
So are we all going to be Bitcoin millionaires by the end of the year?
Well, not so fast.
Mm.
Not everyone is as bullish on Bitcoin, and there are some analysts who are warning of a potential correction,
That's right.
meaning the price could drop significantly, maybe even in the near future.
Okay. I've seen some predictions that Bitcoin could drop to $70,000 or even $80,000, which would be a pretty big hit, especially for someone who's like just getting started with Bitcoin.
That's true. And there are a few things that could trigger such a correction, including regulatory crackdowns, market manipulation by those whales we talked about earlier, and competition from other assets like gold or even other cryptocurrencies. So it's not all sunshine and roses. There are definitely some risks to consider.
So it sounds like it's a bit of a gamble. You know, do you buy now and hope for the best, or do you wait and see if the price dips? What would you recommend for someone who's thinking about making their first Bitcoin investment?
That's a great question, and unfortunately, there's no easy answer. The decision of whether to buy Bitcoin now or wait for a dip is a personal one, and it depends on your individual risk tolerance, your investment goals, and your overall financial situation, so there's no one-size-fits-all answer.
Okay, so it sounds like it's important to do your research and understand the risks before you jump in, which is exactly what we're trying to do here today. But even with all the ups and downs, Bitcoin has been a phenomenal performer over the past decade. You know, it's hard to ignore that kind of track record.
It's true, Bitcoin has had an incredible run, and there are a lot of people who believe that the best is yet to come. But it's important to remember that past performance is not a guarantee of future results, and there are still a lot of unknowns when it comes to Bitcoin, so it's important to approach it with a healthy dose of caution.
Definitely. Okay, so we've talked about the current state of Bitcoin, the major developments that are impacting its price, and the potential for both growth and correction. So now let's dive a little bit deeper into the long-term investment potential of Bitcoin. After all, that's probably why you're listening to this deep dive, right?
Absolutely. I think it's important to look beyond the short-term noise and consider whether Bitcoin has what it takes to be a lasting store of value.
Okay, so let's get into it. What are the factors that could continue to drive Bitcoin's value over the long haul? What makes it so appealing to investors?
Well, we've already touched on some of them, but they're worth repeating because they're really at the heart of Bitcoin's value proposition.
Okay.
First, you've got the fixed supply of 21 million Bitcoin. There will never be more than that, which creates scarcity. And as we know from basic economics, scarcity drives up value. So that's a big one.
So it's like digital gold in a way.
Exactly. That's why some people refer to Bitcoin as digital gold, because it has this finite supply, just like gold, which makes it a hedge against inflation, which is a big concern for a lot of investors right now.
Right. Yeah, for sure. That makes sense. And it seems like that limited supply is attracting some pretty big players, right? We talked about institutional investors earlier, but it's not just them, is it?
No, it's not. We're also seeing growing adoption from governments. Some countries are starting to explore the use of Bitcoin for things like making payments or even holding it as part of their reserves,
Wow.
which could have a huge impact on Bitcoin's price and legitimacy in the long run.
It sounds like Bitcoin is slowly becoming more mainstream, more accepted.
It's really a testament to the power of innovation and the appeal of a decentralized digital currency.
Yeah.
But it's still early days, and there are still some big question marks hanging over Bitcoin.
Yeah, we talked about the risks earlier, but it's worth digging into them a bit more, especially if you're thinking about investing. So let's start with regulatory uncertainty. What's the big deal there?
Well, governments around the world are still trying to figure out how to regulate Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies.
Right.
And this lack of clarity creates uncertainty for investors, which can make them hesitant to invest because they don't know what the rules are or if they're going to change. So it's a bit of a waiting game right now.
It's like trying to play a game without knowing all the rules.
Exactly. And it can be frustrating for investors, especially those who are used to the more regulated world of traditional finance. But it's also part of what makes Bitcoin so exciting.
Mhm.
It's a new frontier, and there's a lot of potential for disruption and innovation.
Okay, so regulatory uncertainty is one risk.
Hmm.
What about market manipulation? We talked about the whales earlier. How much of a threat are they?
Well, the whales definitely have the potential to manipulate the market
Okay,
because they hold so much Bitcoin, they can really move the price with their buying and selling,
got it.
which can be dangerous for smaller investors who might get caught up in the swings. So it's important to be aware of this risk and to do your research before you invest. Don't just blindly follow the whales.
That's good advice. And then there's the competition. Bitcoin isn't the only game in town anymore, right? There are all these other cryptocurrencies popping up, and then you've got other investment opportunities like stocks, bonds, real estate. So how does Bitcoin stack up against all that?
That's a great question, and it's one that every investor needs to consider. Bitcoin has a lot of potential, but it also faces some pretty stiff competition from both inside and outside the crypto world. So it's important to weigh the pros and cons and to diversify your portfolio. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, so to speak.
Diversification. That's always good advice, no matter what you're investing in. Okay, so we've talked about the risks, but let's end on a positive note. What are some of the things that make you optimistic about Bitcoin's future? What makes you think it has the potential to be a lasting store of value?
Well, I think the biggest reason for optimism is the growing adoption of Bitcoin by both individuals and institutions. We're seeing more and more people using Bitcoin for everyday transactions and more companies investing in Bitcoin,
Right.
which is a sign that it's gaining mainstream acceptance, which is really crucial for its long-term success.
It's like that snowball effect. The more people use it, the more valuable it becomes.
Exactly. And that's what's so exciting about Bitcoin. It has the potential to create a whole new financial system, one that is decentralized, transparent, and accessible to everyone, which is a pretty powerful idea.
And that's what makes this deep dive so fascinating. It's not just about money. It's about the future of finance and potentially even the future of society.
Absolutely. Bitcoin is more than just an investment. It's a movement. It's a revolution. And it's going to be really interesting to see how it all plays out.
Well, folks, that brings us to the end of part 1 of our deep dive into Bitcoin in 2025. We've covered a lot of ground, but there's still so much more to explore. Join us next time as we delve deeper into the potential impact of Bitcoin and blockchain technology on the world. Until then, keep those brains buzzing. Welcome back to our deep dive into Bitcoin in 2025. It's amazing how much ground we've already covered. But you know what I love most about this? It's not just about the numbers. It's about the big ideas behind Bitcoin that are so fascinating.
I agree completely. It's easy to get caught up in those, day-to-day price fluctuations.
Right.
But Bitcoin represents something much bigger, a fundamental shift in how we think about money and finance.
Okay, so let's zoom out a bit and talk about that.
Yeah.
What exactly is so revolutionary about Bitcoin? What makes it so different from the traditional financial system?
Well, for starters, it's decentralized, which means there's no central authority controlling it, no government, no central bank. It's completely peer-to-peer, which is a radical departure from how we're used to thinking about money.
So it's kind of like the internet of money.
Yeah, that's a great analogy because just like the internet, Bitcoin is built on a distributed network. A network, in this case, it's called the blockchain, which is essentially a public ledger that records every single Bitcoin transaction. And this ledger is distributed across thousands of computers all over the world, so there's no single point of failure, which makes it incredibly secure and resistant to censorship.
That's pretty mind-blowing. So
Yeah.
you're telling me that no one person or entity can control Bitcoin. That's a huge departure from the way things work now, where governments and central banks have a lot of power over our money.
Exactly. And that's what makes Bitcoin so appealing to a lot of people. It gives you more control over your own money, and it's not subject to the whims of politicians or central bankers, which can be a big deal, especially in times of economic uncertainty or political instability.
Yeah, we've seen that play out in recent years with things like the global financial crisis and the rise of authoritarianism in some parts of the world. People are, losing faith in those traditional institutions,
Right.
and they're looking for alternatives. And Bitcoin is emerging as a viable option.
Absolutely. And it's not just about individuals. We're also seeing some countries, especially those with weak or unstable currencies, exploring the potential of Bitcoin as a way to stabilize their economies
Mm.
and give their citizens more financial freedom. So it's a trend that's definitely worth watching.
Okay, so we've talked about decentralization.
Mm.
What else makes Bitcoin so different? What are some of the other key features that set it apart?
Well, another important feature is transparency, because all Bitcoin transactions are recorded on that public blockchain. Anyone can see them, which makes it very difficult to hide or launder money, which is a big problem with traditional financial systems.
So it's kind of like a giant public accounting ledger.
Exactly. And this transparency is one of the things that makes Bitcoin so attractive to businesses and governments, because it can help to reduce fraud and corruption, which can save them a lot of money in the long run.
It's really interesting. So Bitcoin isn't just for, techies and libertarians.
Right.
It has the potential to impact mainstream businesses and even governments.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to understand the underlying technology and the principles behind it, because this is not just a fad. This is like a fundamental shift in how we think about money and finance.
Okay, so let's shift gears again and talk about some of the broader implications of Bitcoin. If this technology really takes off, what could it mean for the future of money? Could we see a world where Bitcoin replaces traditional currencies?
That's a big question, and it's one that a lot of people are debating right now. Some experts believe that Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies could eventually replace fiat currencies like the US dollar, while others are more skeptical. They argue that Bitcoin is too volatile, too complex, and too difficult to use for everyday transactions to ever truly replace fiat currencies.
So it's like a battle between the old guard and the new guard, the traditional financial system versus the, decentralized crypto-powered future.
Exactly. And it's a battle that's still unfolding. It's too early to say who will win, but it's clear that Bitcoin is a force to be reckoned with, and it's already having a major impact on the financial world.
So even if Bitcoin doesn't completely replace fiat currencies, it's still going to have a major impact, right? It's going to force the traditional financial system to adapt and evolve.
Absolutely. We're already seeing that happening. Banks are starting to offer cryptocurrency services. Governments are exploring the potential of central bank digital currencies, and fintech companies are innovating at a rapid pace. So the financial landscape is definitely changing, and Bitcoin is one of the main drivers of that change.
That's really exciting.
It's
We're on the cusp of a new era of finance, one that is more open, more transparent, and more inclusive.
I agree, and I think it's important for everyone, regardless of whether they're interested in investing in Bitcoin or not, to understand these trends, because they're going to have a major impact on our lives in the years to come.
Okay, so we've talked about the potential impact of Bitcoin on the future of money, but what about the underlying technology blockchain? We've mentioned it a few times, but it's worth digging a bit deeper because blockchain has a lot of potential applications beyond just cryptocurrencies, right?
Absolutely. Blockchain technology is incredibly versatile, and it can be used to create a wide range of applications in many different industries, from supply chain management to healthcare to voting and beyond.
Okay, so let's start with supply chain management. How can blockchain be used in that context?
One of the biggest challenges in supply chain management is tracking products as they move from the manufacturer to the consumer. There are often multiple intermediaries involved, and it can be difficult to keep track of where each product is and what condition it's in, which can lead to inefficiencies, delays, and even fraud.
It's like trying to follow a package through the mail system. It can be a real nightmare sometimes.
Exactly. But blockchain can help to solve this problem by creating a secure, transparent, and immutable record of each product's journey through the supply chain. So every time a product changes hands, that transaction is recorded on the blockchain, which creates a permanent, auditable trail that can be accessed by anyone with permission.
So it's kind of like giving each product its own digital passport.
That's a great way to think about it, and this passport can contain all sorts of information about the product, from its origin and manufacturing date to its current location and condition, which can help businesses to improve efficiency, reduce costs, and prevent fraud.
That's amazing. So blockchain can actually make our supply chains more efficient, more transparent, and more trustworthy. That's a big deal.
It is, and it's one of the most promising applications of blockchain technology. We're already seeing companies in a wide range of industries, from food and agriculture to pharmaceuticals to luxury goods, experimenting with blockchain-based supply chain solutions, and I think we're going to see a lot more adoption in the years to come.
Okay, so that's supply chain management. What about voting? How can blockchain be used to improve our elections?
Well, one of the biggest challenges with traditional voting systems is security and transparency. It can be difficult to ensure that all votes are counted accurately and that the results are not tampered with, which can undermine public trust in the democratic process.
Yeah, we've certainly seen that play out in recent years with all the concerns about voter fraud and election interference.
Exactly. But blockchain technology has the potential to address these concerns by creating a secure, transparent, and tamper-proof voting system. So each vote would be recorded on the blockchain, which would make it virtually impossible to alter or delete. And because the blockchain is a public ledger, anyone could audit the results, which would increase transparency and accountability.
So it's kind of like taking the power away from the people who might be tempted to manipulate the results and giving it back to the voters.
Exactly. And that's what's so exciting about blockchain-based voting. It has the potential to make our elections more secure, more transparent, and more democratic.
That's a really powerful idea, and it's something that I think a lot of people are hoping for, especially in today's world where trust in institutions is at an all-time low, so blockchain could be a way to restore that trust, at least in the context of our elections.
I agree. And while there are still some technical challenges to overcome, I think we're going to see more and more countries experimenting with blockchain-based voting systems in the years to come. So it's definitely a trend worth watching.
Okay, so we've talked about supply chain management, voting.
Yeah.
What about healthcare? How can blockchain be used to improve our healthcare systems?
Well, one of the biggest challenges in healthcare is data management. Patient records are often scattered across multiple providers, which can make it difficult to access, share, and manage this data, which can lead to inefficiencies, errors, and even medical mistakes.
It's like trying to put together a puzzle with missing pieces. It can be really frustrating and potentially even dangerous.
Exactly. But blockchain can help to solve this problem by creating a secure, centralized platform for storing and managing patient data. So instead of each provider having their own separate database, all patient data would be stored on the blockchain, which would make it accessible to any authorized provider, regardless of their location or affiliation.
So it's kind of like giving each patient control over their own medical records and allowing them to share that data with whomever they choose.
That's right. And this can have a number of benefits. It can empower patients to take a more active role in their own care. It can improve coordination between providers, and it can help to prevent errors and duplicative testing, which can save the healthcare system a lot of money.
That's incredible. So blockchain can actually help to improve the quality, efficiency, and affordability of healthcare. That's a game changer.
It is, and it's one of the most exciting applications of blockchain technology. We're already seeing healthcare providers, insurance companies, and pharmaceutical companies exploring the potential of blockchain, and I think we're going to see a lot more innovation in this space in the years to come.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this segment, from the decentralized nature of Bitcoin to the broader implications of blockchain technology. It's clear that this technology has the potential to revolutionize many different industries and to change the world in profound ways. But it's also important to remember that it's still early days and there's still a lot of challenges to overcome.
Absolutely, but that's what makes it so exciting. We're witnessing the birth of a new technology, and we have the opportunity to shape its development and ensure that it is used for good. So let's keep exploring, keep learning, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
Well said. And on that note, let's move on to our final segment where we'll wrap things up and offer some closing thoughts on the future of Bitcoin and the blockchain. Welcome back to the deep dive. I don't know about you, but I'm still buzzing from our last segment. It's mind-blowing to think about all the ways blockchain technology could change the world.
It really is. It's not just about Bitcoin anymore. It's about the potential for this tech to create a more efficient, transparent, and equitable future for everyone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's bring it back to you, our listener, and try to answer the big question, is Bitcoin still a good investment in 2025?
That's the question everyone wants answered, right? I think the first thing to remember is that Bitcoin is still a very volatile asset.
Yeah.
You know, we've seen some pretty big swings in its price just in the past few months, and that volatility is likely to continue.
There's not for the faint of heart.
Right. It's important to have a strong stomach if you're going to invest in Bitcoin because the ride can be bumpy. But for those who are comfortable with the risk, Bitcoin still offers the potential for significant rewards, especially if you believe in its long-term potential.
Okay, so it's a high-risk, high-reward kind of investment, but what about the long-term potential? We've talked about all the exciting things that Bitcoin and blockchain technology could bring. But are those things actually going to happen?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And unfortunately, no one has a crystal ball. But I think it's safe to say that Bitcoin and blockchain technology are here to stay. They're not going away anytime soon, and they're only going to become more important in the years to come.
So even if Bitcoin doesn't become like the global currency that some people predict, it's still going to have a major impact on the world.
Absolutely. I think we're just scratching the surface of what's possible with this technology, and I'm really excited to see what the future holds.
Me too. So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's recap some of the key takeaways for you, our listener.
Okay, first and foremost, remember that Bitcoin is a decentralized digital currency, which means it's not controlled by any government or financial institution.
Right.
Which can be a good thing and a bad thing.
Right. It gives you more control over your own money, but it also means there's no safety net if things go wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's important to do your research, understand the risks, and only invest what you can afford to lose.
Absolutely. And the second key takeaway is that Bitcoin is built on blockchain technology, which is a revolutionary new way of storing and managing data that has a wide range of potential applications beyond just cryptocurrencies.
We talked about some of those applications earlier, like supply chain management, voting, and healthcare, and we're only going to see more innovative uses of blockchain technology in the years to come.
So even if you're not interested in investing in Bitcoin, it's still worth learning about blockchain technology because it's going to have a major impact on our lives in the future.
I completely agree. And the third key takeaway is that the future of Bitcoin and blockchain technology is still very uncertain. There are a lot of challenges that need to be overcome and a lot of questions that need to be answered. So it's important to stay informed, stay curious, and be prepared for the unexpected.
It's like the Wild West out there, right? Anything could happen.
Exactly. But that's also what makes it so exciting. It's a new frontier, and there's a lot of opportunity for those who are willing to take the risk.
So as we leave you today, we want to leave you with a final thought-provoking question to ponder as you continue your journey into the world of Bitcoin and blockchain technology. What will the future of money look like?
Will it be dominated by traditional currencies, or will cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin take over?
Will we see the rise of new decentralized financial systems? Or will the old guard find a way to adapt and maintain control?
Only time will tell, but one thing is for sure, the future of money is going to be very interesting.
And we'll be here to help you navigate it every step of the way.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you learned something new, and we encourage you to continue exploring the fascinating world of Bitcoin and blockchain technology.
And remember, always do your research, invest wisely, and never stop learning. Until next time.